Hello, and welcome back to Eastern Iowa Lower Central Iowa's most watched news channel, KCRD News at 9:15. I am Chet You Betcha here reporting as usual, and will be joined soon by eyewitness reporter Bernard Buster Brown. On today's newscast, we will be discussing an issue that has taken a wild ride throughout American history. That issue is child labor. Now, obviously today we see child labor as a 15-year-old bagging groceries at your local grocery store. But as many of you know, it hasn't always been like that in America's history. From the Industrial Revolution to now, you may find yourself surprised how child labor has changed and shaped our history. With more on that, I will now send it to Bernard Buster Brown. Buster?
Thanks, Chet. I'm here to talk to you about child labor laws. Child labor began in the mid to late 1800s when immigrating families in the Americas began working in factories at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and it was at its peak in the 1900s. These families, also known as the working class, made up 80% of America's working population. As early as 5 years old to teenagers, kids were working unthinkable hours, doing manual labor. This led to harsh living conditions for children and their families, who barely got by even though their whole families were working rigorous hours. Wages for these kids were usually around $3 a day, and some worked up to 19 hours a day with 1 hour break. The factories they worked in were usually wool, cotton, and coal. These jobs left them filthy and exhausted, which led to bad hygiene and illness throughout their communities. With this came rebellion from the Americans, who were worried about the health and well-being of these children. There was also a concern that if our children weren't attending school, we wouldn't be looking bright in the future for technology and innovation. This led to the history events which I will now go over. In 1836, the first state child labor law was passed. Massachusetts required children under 15 years of age working in factories to attend school at least 3 months a year. In 1842, states began to limit children's working hours. Massachusetts limits the children's work days to 10 hours. Other states soon passed similar laws, but most of these laws were not consistently enforced. In 1876, the labor movement urged the minimum wage law. Working Men's Party proposes banning the employment of children under the age of 14. In 1883, the New York unions with state reform. Led by Samuel Gompers, the New York labor movement successfully sponsored legislation prohibiting cigar making in tenements, where thousands of young children work in the trade. In 1892, Democrats adopted a union recommendation. The Democratic Party adopted a platform plank based on union recommendations to ban factory employment for children under the age of 15. In 1904, the National Child Labor Committee formed the Aggressive National Campaign for Federal Child Labor Law Reform. New federal law sanctioned state violators. The first federal child labor law prohibited the movement of goods across state lines if minimum age laws are violated. In 1924, the first attempt to gain federal regulation failed. The Congress passed a constitutional amendment giving the federal government authority to regulate child labor, but too few states ratified it and it never took effect. In 1936, the Federal Purchasing Law passed. Walsh-Healy Act stated that the government will not purchase goods made by underage children. In 1937, the second attempt to gain federal regulation failed. The second attempt to ratify the constitutional amendment giving federal government authority to regulate child labor failed, just short of getting necessary votes. In 1937, the new federal law sanctioned growers. The Sugar Act made sugar beet growers ineligible for benefit payments if they violated state minimum age and hours for work standards. In 1938, the Federal Regulation of Child Labor achieved in Fair Labor Standards Act. For the first time, minimum age of employment and hours of work for children are regulated by the federal law. In 1938, Federal Regulation of Child Labor laws achieved in Fair Labor Standards Act. For the first time in history, minimum ages of employment and hours of work for children are regulated by federal law. Now back to Chet for official stated federal and state of Iowa law on child labor today.
Thanks, Buster Brown. Federal law. The main law regulating child labor in the United States is Fair Labor Standards Act. In general, for non-agricultural jobs, children under 12 may not be employed. Children between 12 and 16 may be employed in allowed occupations during limited hours, and children between 16 and 18 may be employed for unlimited hours in non-hazardous occupations. A number of exceptions on these rules exist, such as employment by parents, newspaper delivery, child actors, and more. The regulations for agriculture employment are generally more lenient. Children as young as 12 may be employed unlimited hours outside of school hours with parental permission. As for Iowa, here's what our states specifically. That's a lot of states too, isn't it? Youth under the age of 16 in Iowa are required to have a work permit before starting work. The following information is intended to clarify some of the Iowa child labor laws. So if you're asking who needs a work permit, here's your answer. People under 16 years of age cannot be employed or permitted to work with or without compensation unless the person, firm, or corporation employing the youth receives and keeps a work permit on file, accessible to any officer charged with the enforcement of the child labor laws. The employer also is required to keep a complete list of the names and ages of anyone under 16 years of age in his employ. How do you get a work permit? A youth first must go in person to the local school official designated as an issuing officer on the Iowa Workforce Development Center and provide one of the following acceptable forms of evidence of age: a certified copy of a birth certificate, current passport or certified copy of baptismal record showing the date and place of birth and the place of child's baptism. If none of these is available, then a written certification from a physician certifying that in the physician's opinion the applicant is 14 years of age or older is required. The employer then must complete the work permit child labor form, specifically listing all the work the minor will be performing, equipment he will use, and hours to be worked. After completing this section, the minor's parents completes and signs his portion of the form. The form then is returned to the issuing officer for review. So you might ask, what hours can 14 or 15-year-olds work? Well, outside school hours between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. for the day after Labor Day in September through May 31st, and no more than 4 hours per day Monday through Friday, or 8 hours per day on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. No more than a total of 28 hours per week is allowed. From June 1st through Labor Day, a minor may work up to 8 hours. A minor may work up to 8 hours between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m., but no more than 40 hours per week. Federal child labor laws restrict maximum work hours to 18 hours per week from the day after Labor Day in September through May 31st, with 3 hours per day, Monday through Friday, outside of school hours, and 8 hours on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. So, obviously these laws are in place, but it doesn't mean they aren't broken. Here are the biggest child labor scandals in recent history. Apple was hit with allegation that its iPhones and other electronic gadgets were manufactured in Chinese factories by child laborers. In February, Apple announced that it had found 91 children worked at its suppliers in 2010, a 9-fold increase from the previous year. The company also acknowledged that 137 workers had been poisoned by the chemical N-hexane at a supplier's manufacturing facility, and that less than a third of the facilities it audited were complying with Apple's code on working hours. In the year prior to December 2010, Apple had sales over $65 billion. Another big scandal was from all you girls out there shopping, Victoria's Secret. And this scandal is nicknamed Victoria's Hidden Secret. Children help harvest the cotton and go into garments. Bloomsburg Market magazine revealed in December that some of the cotton retail giant Victoria's Secret used its harvested by young children in the West African nation of Burkina Faso. The piece profiled 13-year-old Clarissa Cambier, who worked on a cotton farm where she said she was routinely beaten by the owner. By hand, Clarissa performs the work that many farmers use a plow and ox to perform, and often works in 100-plus degree temperatures. Just one meal a day, and sometimes she gets no food. Many of the children, like Clarice, are considered foster children and receive no wages. Most do attend school, limitedly though. The parent company of Victoria's Secret has annual sales of an excess $5 billion. Now, although the laws were changed many years ago, there has been many state attempts to roll back child labor laws. Conservative legislators in Missouri, Wisconsin, and Maine worked to reduce child labor protections in 2011. The Maine legislature increased the number of hours teens can work during the school week from 20 to 24 and allowed them to work till 11 p.m. at night. In Wisconsin, legislators pushed through changes without a public hearing or debate. That removed restrictions on the total hours that 16 and 17-year-olds can work. A bill to weaken protections in Missouri went down to defeat, but legislators essentially got their way by defunding the state labor and investigation team. Obviously, child labor laws still aren't perfect and still are even debated today. But we will now bring it back to Bernard Buster Brown, who is there for some interviews with some local legends. Bernard?
Hi, I'm Bernard Buster Brown, and I'm here with Mr. Allen. Mr. Allen, how are you doing today?
I'm just fine. Thank you much for asking.
I'm going to ask you a few questions about child labor. First, what do you know about child labor laws in America?
Probably not as much now as I used to. When I took econ at Iowa State, I knew quite a bit. But I think we've got a pretty good handle, at least here in the United States, but certainly not in other countries around the world.
Okay. Do you buy from companies that are suspected of child labor, such as Victoria's Secret?
Unfortunately, I don't even know where Victoria's Secret's located. Secondly, I guess I don't buy that much, so I doubt very much if I do. If I knew of it, I would not buy that particular product.
Do you think the government should intervene in child labor, such as like kids working on their parents' farms and stuff like that?
When it comes to children working on their parents' farms, I think the government should stay out. Okay, I think those kids know exactly what they're doing. They don't need any kind of interference.
All right. Any other comments on this topic?
So I'm sure Mikey Donovan would certainly agree with me on that last comment. Other than that, I have no comment to make at this time.
All right. We thank you for your time and your knowledge, and we hope to see you soon. I'm Bernard Buster Brown here with the John Demery, captain of the Regina Art Club. John, what do you know about child labor laws here in America?
I don't know a whole lot. I do know that there are some laws that restrict how many hours children can work, and I guess that's about it.
All right. Well said. Do you buy from any companies that are suspected of illegal child labor laws, such as Victoria's Secret?
You know, I'm not familiar with a lot of the companies that are suspected of breaking child labor laws, and it's been ages since I've shopped at Victoria's Secret.
Any other comments on this topic?
No.
Well, we thank you for your time and your input, and you have a nice day, sir.
Thank you. You as well.